Next speaker is Dr. Prasad Kaipa, the CEO, advisor, and coach. He will be speaking on yoga and wise leadership. He will help us understand how the yogic ideals of transcendental and humanistic values, objective reality, and subjective experiences can be utilized to solve corporate challenges.
Namaste to everybody. To speak in front of various swamis and invited guests, I consider this as my honor. And this is the first presentation I am making on the upcoming book. As a matter of fact, around 11 o'clock this morning, I just finished editing it. So I take this as an auspicious opportunity to just think through what I tried to present in this book. The context in which the yoga and the wise leadership become important is because of the complexity that we live in. If you look at the diversity in the room, it's just a reflection of what's going on out in the world. The idea of how Mr. Goldberg talked about how there was large amount of interest. For example, in a Bhakti fest, there are large number of Western audience and very few Indian audience. When you call it Yoga Sangam, there are lots of Indian audience and there are some Western audience as well. So the key part it comes down to is recognizing that the diversity has become the name of the game and how you work with it. Because the world has become one small, interconnected, as they call Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that has become a reality. It is no longer something which you can talk about in Vedas or Upanishads, but we are experiencing it. In addition to the diversity, the second major problem that comes up is the interdependence. Like, if you look at the clothes you are wearing, probably many of the parts of the clothes come from many parts of the world, as a matter of fact. And like when I was working with Boeing, a gentleman called Alan Malali, who is now heading up the Ford, he used to say, we have 30,000 suppliers coming from 43 different countries and approximately 17 million parts that go into any single airplane, which is being sold to something like 37 different airlines, and every plane is customized for all of them. So in some respects, the interdependence is the name of the game, because whether we like it or not, whether we appreciate it or not, just taking the word human being is a social animal is no longer sufficient. We are actually completely part of the interdependent nature of the reality that we live in, which is even reflected recently when you look at Facebook or when you look at Twitter, when you look at all the things that are going on, that shows the need for not just the internal way of recognizing the interdependence and the external way in which the world is reflecting what is going on. The third one is obviously the globalization. I don't think that I need to talk very much about. And the fourth one is the speed. Of course, some of the traditional one in the Silicon Valley we use is that there are some things called Moore's Law. One Moore's Law was talking about how quickly the number of transistors began to increase and the size of it is becoming smaller and smaller, and the speed at which it goes is even faster and faster. So for example, a small computer like this, what it contains, and when I was doing my PhD about 30 years ago, even the computer which was in a whole room, the IBM 360, didn't have the capability that this has got. And I wouldn't be surprised in probably a couple of years, whatever is there is probably far superseded in a computer, in a phone that you will have, and in a few days probably we will have just the earpiece, we'll miss the phone itself. So the world is getting to a place where the speed of information, speed of change is much faster than how human beings can assimilate. So the need for today is not having more information, is not having more data, but having an interpretation of that information. That's the reason why, if you notice, people are more interested in the editorial. How do you really make sense of the data that is present? It is not just having the data. Like, for example, if you go to Google and if you search for anything, you get so much of information, most of it is irrelevant, or you don't know what to actually make sense of. So how do you really use speed as a way to connect with oneself and connect with each other? That is becoming extremely important, because the next one is the ambiguity. What comes with the speed is the ambiguity. We don't know how fast we need to do. Like business leaders, well, because the topic is wise leadership, are all quoted for wrong reasons these days. Majority of the time, like for example, one of the doyens of Indian management, Rajat Gupta, ends up getting what you call indicted for certain things. Probably, here people, when I talk to various people, they say, well, that happens all the time, except that he got caught. When we begin to take it for granted, something which we thought about very carefully at one time, what is the basis of my action? What is the basis of my decision? How do I really think about what is appropriate, what is not appropriate? What is the coda? What is the logic by which I make decisions? When we talk about buddhi, samsayatmaka buddhi, when you talk about some of the buddhi thing, what is the nature based on which you make decisions? It's not about decisions. It's about the underlying logic that we use, that we make decisions. That is becoming much harder because of the ambiguity. So the moral ambiguity, lack of ethical compass, the lack of value system that is shared becomes extremely important and brings the need for yoga and some other things. What it all comes from is a scarcity mindset. Instead of a certain abundance, we are always looking at how do we manage our time. One of the things which most people look at is saying, oh, I'm busy. That means you made it. When you tell people you don't have time, what you are trying to communicate it is, I am so big, who you are or what you want, all of them are secondary to me. So that means at some level, the scarcity of resources are not just about something out there. It is the scarcity of resources that become part of who we are. We don't have time for each other. We don't have time for love. Like if you go to business meetings, one of the things they say is, I don't have time for lot of, lecture. Give me net. What is that you are trying to say? Just tell me, what is the summary of that? For, 30-second elevator pitch is not just for the venture capitalists and the, what you call entrepreneurs. It has become a part of the thing, because if I try to talk to my children and try to give something, say, Dad, I don't have time for lecture. Tell me, what is it that you want me to do or not want me to do? So this is the language. So in that respect, what we are talking about is creating a large amount of ethical challenges. The leadership is in a major crisis, and that is reflected not just in a talk. There was a report that came out by IBM called the Capitalizing on Complexity. It says, when they interviewed approximately 1,600 CEOs, these are global CEOs, they say 80% of them do not feel confident that they know that they can keep their head above the water for the next 5 years. Only 20% of them feel that they know how to manage the business as they go forward. And similarly, if you look at a lot of reports that come out, even the 2012 report or 2011 report, basically the employee disengagement is over 60%. What it means is, most people go to work not necessarily fully engaged with the mission, vision, values, or the purpose or the objectives of it. They go there because that's the only way they can get the money. So I will go there, you give me my 4-hour module, I will get it done. If I get it done early, I will not tell you I got it done early because you are going to give me another module. So what am I going to do? I will do whatever I normally do, assume that it is 4 hours, and then I go back. So there is a certain inability for people to connect with the society, with family, and with work. And this reflects in a deep sense of lack of happiness, a deep sense of discontentment, and a large number of what you might call a the diseases of the rich, the diabetes, obesity, many of the diseases which don't need to come and were not present before, because we do everything. I mean, we want it in plastic, and we want it in microwave, and we want it in a particular way, and we want everything to be accelerated process. So even a rice cooker, which is the faster way to do, that has got a quick mode and a regular mode. Because to cook rice, it takes 1.5 hours if you do brown rice. So if you put it in a quick mode, it will come out in 30 minutes. So a quick technology has got a quicker solutions. Only thing which we don't have is how to deal with human life. That is one of the things which we are struggling with. So the challenges that come up, and because of all these challenges, what we are struggling with is that there needs to be a radical change in leadership approach. I want to tell a story instead of just talking about the point. This is all about creating context. You know, all of you probably have heard of it sometime or another. Once upon a time, in the forest, there was a smart fox and there was a cool cat. They came together right after all the hunters had gone for that particular hunting season. That's what they thought. And they were lamenting about all the people whom they lost, all the friends and all the relatives and all the good friends. And then they were saying, you know what, I just don't know. I don't know how I survived. All my friends are gone. And the smart fox, being the smart one, said, I know at least about 20 different ways in which you can escape from the enemies. And the cool cat said, I don't know. I know only one way. I try to run, find a tree, go hide in one of the branches till, you know, they're all gone. How? Fox says, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Cat says, will you please teach me? He said, yeah, we have some time. But unfortunately, just like many people, there were some laggards who came really late, the hunters, that fell upon them. And the cool cat saying, I didn't have chance to spend enough time with the fox, so it ran up and hid in a tree. The smart fox, thinking of which one of the 20 ways it needs to save itself, got killed. Sometimes we have to see, are we being smart cats, or are we, smart foxes, are we being cool cats? It does feel like when you listen to a lecture like this, that smart fox is not a great thing. But smart fox get the things done. They are the entrepreneurs, they are the jugaad innovators, they are the people who can figure out ways to make things done. Only thing is, we don't know how long they will live. That's a whole different matter, which is not of this subject topic, right? Cool cats get the job done because they have the operational excellence, they know how to stay with something, go deeper, cost, quality, delivery, customer satisfaction. You know, like Silicon Valley is all about cool cats. It's not about smart foxes, even though to get into the job, you need to be a smart fox, but to succeed in the job, you need to be a cool cat. If you don't have that, it doesn't work. So in some respects, without cool cats, execution suffers. But you see, in our mind, we think, how smart I am. It doesn't work how smart you are in executing, because both the minds operate in a very, very different way. I call cool cats as one kind of smartness, smart fox as another kind of smartness. The cool cats have got what is called a functional smartness. They are very good in a functional expertise. They try to go deep. They try to focus on what needs to get done. They stay within the box. They stay very comfortable. They are the people whom you need in your entrepreneurial organization for you to deliver the products and get the job done. Whereas the smart foxes are the people who have the ability to see things across multiple stuff. They are what you might call a business smart. They can see opportunities just like that. They are fast, they are quick, they see the patterns, they interconnect, they look for opportunities, they are the one who raise the money. They can actually make things happen because they can connect the dots much more quickly than other people. Those are generally what we call high IQ at some level, especially when we are talking in the context of business IQ. We need both of them, because without the smart foxes, you will not have the growth for it, whatever you are doing in an organization. You need to be able to create the various type of things like out-of-box thinking or innovation or competitiveness comes because of that. What I believe is that sometimes when smart foxes stay only in their foxholes, don't think about the other part, this is what we end up with. These are the legacies of smart fox who went too much out of the box. Probably you can recognize many of them, whether they are a congressman, whether they are a prime minister, whether they are something else. Sometimes we just think we can get away. We just think that we are better than everybody else and nobody needs to pay attention. Now, think about some of these people. These are all CEOs, these are all leaders of different kinds. Are they smart or are they cool? If you begin to think about it, you notice that we have different ways of thinking. Even among the genders, we have a polarization. Somebody said, man has two switches. Women are a lot more complex. Probably women have to tell me whether that is true or not, because they seem to be able to manage the emotional intelligence a lot more. Whereas for men, it has been an issue sometimes. I do believe time has come for us to create a new model. Smartness is not sufficient. One end of smartness is the functional smartness. Another end of smartness is the business smartness. But there is a whole range of smartness spectrum. We need to figure out what is in between. What I propose is a third model, what I call a wise owl. As we know, the owl is known for wisdom. If I bring it back into yoga, the concept of yoga, we talk about, samatvam yoga uchyate. There is a certain equanimity, there is a certain balance that is required. How do you bring the balance? Not by staying in the middle. The yoga way of balancing is not just staying at one place, because that is considered in yoga, if you are not dynamic, you are dead. So the idea is, you move between the two extremes. But while moving between the two extremes of one kind of smartness or the other kind of smartness, you also take a deep breath to be able to say how to be wise. So it is not about getting attached to one kind of mind. It is not about getting attached to the past successes. I come up with a concept called core incompetence. Wherever you got the biggest success last year, that is where your foot is nailed to the floor. Why? When you are really in a crisis, you will go right back to using what brought you success last time. That is what we call sometimes a winning formula. Our children pick it up very quickly. They know how to deal with the mother differently. They know how to deal with the father differently. But when both of them want to stand together and ask the children, they don't want to deal with it. They want to deal with one at a time. Why? They know the winning formula, how to succeed with the mother, how to succeed with the father. But when you bring both of them, then you bring balance. When you try to do that, then it becomes a lot harder. I believe the wise leadership is about learning to balance the two extremes, but in a dynamic way. Learning to take the glasses off. One extreme, you have an entrepreneurial set of glasses. Another extreme, you have the functional glasses. Actually, IBM has come up with a way called T kind of personalities they need. You need the depth of an I, but also the crossbar of the T, which is required if you want to be extremely successful in the 21st century. Some of these people are wise leaders in my mind. I tried to bring it from various kinds of scenario. If you notice, I haven't put single business leader really in that. Reason for that is, now for past 2.5 years I have interviewed over 250 people in terms of wise leaders. There are only half a dozen names that came up. Warren Buffett, Narayana Murthy, Ratan Tata, Oprah Winfrey, interestingly, and some people are saying now Bill Gates had moved from being a functional leader from being a cool cat, he has moved into a little bit wise leader. They say after Steve Jobs died, in some respects, he went from being a smart fox. In some of the areas, they do believe they have demonstrated, he has demonstrated certain wisdom. But there are very, very few people who are well known in the world who are considered to be wise leaders in all the characteristics. So in some respects, if you want to look at, wise leadership has penetrated in the consciousness and the cognition in the East quite a bit, but it has not been practiced recently. But thanks to yoga, there is a way in which we are actually beginning to look at it in a much deeper way. What does wise leadership essentially mean? Yogastha kuru karmani. Whatever you do it with the yoga state of the mind. That's all the essence it comes down to. So do whatever. It is not that wise leaders are always wise. As Swami Bodhananda was saying a little earlier, you do whatever you do, but sometimes, you may be angry, but you know you are angry. Anger doesn't have you. You have the anger. So the yoga means essentially knowing when I am on this extreme and when I am on this extreme, and learning to be able to consciously and with awareness to be able to move myself from one to another. That is what you might call equanimity. Equanimous mind. Yoga is all about equanimity and some of that. How do I define that, wise leadership? I define it as leveraging the smartness. It is not about giving up smartness. It is leveraging your smartness for the greater good. For something beyond what is in it for me. Beyond the greed, figure out enlightened self-interest. You don't have to be altruistic, but from a selfish interest to a selfless interest, bring a balance, bring an enlightened self-interest. That is something which you might look at. Second part of wise leadership is about how do you do that? You balance action with reflection and application of your smartness just to make quick money and introspective. Is this ethically appropriate? Is this going to lead me someplace where I need to go? And then look at it and say, where do I need to bring humility and ethical clarity? Because without humility, wisdom doesn't have much meaning. Remember, it is not a process. You can't just read a book, including whatever I'm trying to write, to become wise. But you look at somebody, you have a certain principles, you have certain practices, but ultimately you need to change your own perspective. You have to develop your own wisdom logic. Is the wisdom I'm talking about same as the spiritual wisdom or a religious wisdom? Or is it a common sense, prudence? I do believe, like Aristotle once talked about phronesis as the practical wisdom, Sophia as the spiritual wisdom. In yoga, for example, is a practical wisdom came from a spiritual set of roots. That's what makes it applicable. That's what makes it something that allows you to be who you are, whatever religion you come from, whatever tradition you have, but still gain the wisdom from multiple places. The concept of yoga, you can look at it from even some of the spiritual traditions, Ardhanarishvara. The concept of balance, concept of bringing in the feminine and the masculine, the yin and the yang. So what can you do to ignite your wise leadership and wise genius? First, when you connect with people, connect as a cool cat. Bring some humility, bring some depth. Connect with people at the heart level. Focus on how can I add value to them? How can I bring expertise, my ability to do something much more meaningfully. Then include your smart foxness when you think about opportunities. Whether it is opportunities for them, opportunities for me, try to do what you can to do some brainstorming. But the key of leadership is not about what you do. What do other people around you do? Leadership is not about you ever. It is all about role modeling and practicing in such a way people around you are able to do something that they were not able to do by themselves. How do you inspire? How do you ignite leadership in other people? That is what you might want to do. So I will stop with the 6 principles which I am looking at. And by the way, when I say the wise leadership, this one, these are straight from the 18th chapter. If you look at, there are 6 things Krishna talks about for the sattvic, rajasic and tamasic, the whole guna aspects of it. He looks at gnanam. I translate gnanam not as knowledge, but I translate gnanam as perspective. In 18th century, 19th century, in Sanskrit word gnanam comes to become knowledge. But in the 20th and 21st century, where we talk about data, information and knowledge as a very different interpretation, that's why when you talk about pragnanam or when you talk about vijnanam, vijnanam is the application of that perspective in creating some technology. That is what is vijnanam. Pragnanam, pragna. Dakshinamurti is known for the pragna. The idea of that brilliant insight, brilliant perspective that you gain, that is again. So from my perspective, in the Sanskrit root, if I look at etymology and if I look at some of it, translating it as a perspective seems to work quite well. It says you need a perspective, but don't stop with it. You need to take right action that is based on what is your dharma. Whoever you are, based on what context you are in, the dharma becomes different. I'm sure you are familiar with a simple story where a famous woman came to learn Bhagavad Gita and she spent a lot of time in India before she came to the Pandit. The monk, or rather the scholar, was very arrogant. A white woman wanting to learn some of this, and he said first one, first sloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre. And she said, what a beautiful thing. Thank you very much. He said, you woman, shut up and listen. I haven't even completed the full sloka. This is only the first line. He said, but that itself is wonderful. What is wonderful? I just said in this particular location, in that particular shape. Please wait. This is what I understood. She said, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre, you said. What I understood is, kshetre dharmam kuru. Wherever I go, whichever field I am operating from, whether I am in my home, whether I am in work, whether I am in family, dharmam kuru. Do the dharma that is appropriate. That means in a family, I need to do a family dharma. When I am in workplace, I need to do workplace dharma. When I am in community, I need to do community dharma. But if I mix up some of this, somewhere along that, you lose yourself. That is what is called losing swadharma. When you lose that, then you have actually gone out of balance. So the right action is about that. And the third one is the karta. Essentially, you have to have a detached engagement. You are an agent of change. You are not the doer, not the enjoyer. That means when you are a CEO or when you are a leader, don't get attached to the job that you have or the role that you have. How many people report into you? How much money you make? Or what is the overall budget? Because this will change. This will go away. I will just finish it in a couple of minutes. I know that you are waiting, and actually we will take the questions in a minute. And I will just stop this with this. All right? I am aware of you standing for a minute. All right. The fourth one, it comes down to, is the buddhi. The buddhi, as we said, is the logic by which you make the decisions. It is not the intellect alone. And the fifth one, dhruti. Dhruti is, at some level, knowing when to hold, knowing when to fold. Knowing when to, that is what you might call a flexible fortitude. So, and finally, sukham, that is what you call a enlightened self-interest. So in some respects, if I were to give you suggestions, if you want to be a wise leader, find out what is your North Star, what is your Dhruvata. Where do you want to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Develop a larger perspective. Second, act authentically. You have to be authentic, but it has to be appropriate. Because what is authentic for you may not be authentic for somebody else. That's why Manudharma Shastra says, Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, na bruyat, satyam apriyam. Tell the truth, but don't tell the truth unless other person is going to receive your truth as something that is desirable. Otherwise, they will not believe in what you say and they will negate your relationship. But whatever you do, do not lie. And similarly, figure out how to lead from the front or lead from the back or let other people lead. And decide, whatever you decide, do it with a certain amount of discrimination and discernment. Don't just decide impulsively. Use your intuition, which is not the same as instinct. And then, finally, be flexible. Know on what basis you are holding on to certain tasks, or when you are letting go, and why you let go. And then, ultimately, it all comes down to, do you have enlightened self-interest? Which means, do you believe by serving others, you will get served? Or do you believe, if I don't take care of my interests, nobody is going to take care of me? If you can take away that mindset alone, if not anything else, yoga becomes part of what you practice and who you are. And hopefully, when you go back and try to be a leader, recognize other people around you will have a lot more impact. Thank you very much.
We might have time for one question. Are there any questions? Okay, then we'll conclude the session.
Thank you for coming to the conference.